relaxed conversation. Let me just see if we are live on LinkedIn. It's always a little slow on LinkedIn. Just a moment. Okie dokie.
Just to make you feel even better, Ron, I'm wearing a coat inside.
I do feel bad for you. I saw your post this morning, though, kind of about the fitness pop up.
Oh yes, yeah. The running club selling CBD drinks. Yeah.
I mean, I'd love just another great example of how to use what you're building. I think it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, we've got a brand called Budgie Smugglers coming in next week. Oh, sorry, Carl. Sorry.
No. We are live. So,
all right. Okay.
Hello, everyone. That's the beauty of going live. It's amazing. So, this is Carlos again for another Evolve Talks, and we have the surprise guest, Ron Thurston. But today we have John Hoyle. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name or your surname correctly. Who's the founder of Sook, which is a revolutionary retail business model designed to reimagine physical space where communities can thrive. So, John, it's a pleasure to have you here with us. I always start my talks with the same question. So, who are you, the big picture, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, so I've got probably a bit of an unusual background for a guy in retail. I was a British Army officer, so I've been in. I led a platoon in Iraq, but I've also stood outside Buckingham Palace with a big hat on. So that's a kind of slightly unusual start to my career. And then basically, I'm a landlord. I'm a real estate guy who worked for big businesses like Grosvenor, who own a lot of real estate in London in particular. And I got fed up really with the tired old world of big asset managers and landlords, and got frustrated that shops don't do what I think they should, which is be fun and interesting. And so I set up this business, Sook. You can see a Sook behind me. It's a device you can put into any shop. You can put digital content on the walls. There's 40,000 different lighting hues. We have a full service and fulfillment offer. And also it's data led, so you can get the kind of analytics you'd expect if you're an online only business about what's happening in store. And what we want to create is a platform where the brands of the future and all sorts of non-retail uses can scale globally without the headache of real estate, because it's far too difficult to own and operate a shop, particularly in the UK, and it needn't be. It's just a business model that's got really bloated and overcomplicated, and we're here to simplify that.
Super interesting. And what how typically retail used to be, and what's your vision how the world can be with Sook?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a reason that retail has evolved in the way it has. I mean, shops have been distribution channels for stuff for decades, and that in itself is quite inefficient. You think about the billions of dollars of stock that sit on shelves, a lot of which doesn't get bought. You think about the staffing and the utilities and the rent that's paid in a shop on days of the week where no one's actually going into them. That's kind of inefficient. But the reason that's evolved is because landlords often are actually big asset managers who generally are insurance companies or sometimes are pension funds. And they're chasing a kind of risk-free return for a good reason, so that we can have a pension or we can insure our house or whatever. But the very nature of that approach to risk means that they can only have the biggest brands take the longest leases. And that doesn't help up and coming brands. It doesn't help non-retail uses. It doesn't help community that doesn't have a covenant strength. And so that's why Sook operates to sort of sit in between landlords and occupiers and give all of these people that are excluded from having shops the opportunity to get in them relatively easily.
Mm-hmm. Ron, how is it typically in the US? Do you have anything like Sook?
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. John and I met, I think, probably close to 3 years ago now, and have followed his journey so closely because it's highly unique. And I've spoken often about what John is building because it could do extraordinarily well in the US. And he and I have had those conversations about how to make that happen, because everything he said applies into many. It's very difficult to put up a brand that is of any of kind of a part-time what am I trying to say? A part-time nature. And the idea here of new brands, particularly D2C brands, new designers, this constant innovation which happens in cities like here in LA and New York, having a Sook as an option to do something for a weekend, for a day, for a week, would be extraordinary. And so I know John has some of that in the works, and I just think it is one of the most important evolutions of the retail industry. I think it's exactly what John's building.
Fantastic. John, I was listening to a podcast today where you, I think you were explaining that the lease or the rent part, it's probably 30% for what a retailer has typically to pay, right? Can you explain a little bit how it works? What's the structure, the cost structure for a retailer? Because I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, renting a shop is expensive, but that's only a small fraction of what it costs to operate a shop. In the UK, we have something called business rates, which is about 40% of what the rent is, which you pay just as a tax to the government, and similar taxes exist in the US as well. But what really becomes punitive is some of the stuff I was talking about before. So staffing, if you've got to staff a shop 7 days a week, but you really only make money on a Saturday, that is, punitively expensive. And human resource, as we all know, in this inflationary market is really, really punishing. Interestingly, it doesn't work for employees either. So in the UK, the only sector with a less happy workforce than retail is the mining sector. So, you think about how bonkers that is. You're paying really upset, angry, miserable people to try and sell your product. It just doesn't make any sense. And then there's the stock issue. I've talked about the inefficiency of stock and fulfillment. I mean, in e-commerce, you can order your stock as it gets purchased. Well, why can't that exist in physical retail too, rather than having essentially these, to all intents and purposes, empty shops that just happen to be full of stuff? No one's shopping in them from Monday through to Saturday. So by giving brands the ability to be agile, because that's what we're doing, we're saying, look, everyone has their moment. Every brand has its Christmas. It's just that Christmas is probably at a different time of the year, depending on what your brand is. Well, just have your physical touch point then and drive the halo effect, drive your online sales. No customer journey is the same, and that physical touch point is super, super important. But just save yourself a fortune in the process. And I think the final piece that's really interesting is just brand relevance. It's really tough to stay relevant to your customers 360 days a year. But of course, shops stay open for 365 days a year for 10 years. And we see such a high churn in brands just because they become tired. They stop being cool. And by constantly activating in a different way, it drives FOMO, it drives engagement. And it's that novelty element that actually will get people into your stores with a much deeper engagement than they might achieve if you're just spending heavily on digital marketing.
Really interesting. Go on, Bradley. I was gonna give you the word. Actually, sorry.
Look at that. We're reading each other's minds. John, I'm right in saying business started back in 2019. I've read that on your website, and since then you've opened up 10 shops as such, with plans to expand overseas. I think I was watching an article for one of the news channels, and you were talking about the opportunity to go into Dubai and Montreal. Is that in flight, or have they opened in terms of a presence?
Yeah, so we've actually opened, I think we've opened 15 spaces. We've got 11 operational at the moment. I mean, part of our sort of sustainability mission is to remove all of the waste of fit outs. So our device, you can see behind me, is modular. It can be moved. That's something that landlords love as well, because sometimes they want to have different problems and to need solving in different ways. So we're constantly contracting and extracting. We've got 3 sites in the UAE agreed because we won something called the Aldar Scale Up Program. Aldar's a huge asset manager in Abu Dhabi. And alongside that, Majid Al Futtaim, who own Mall of the Emirates and Murdif Mall in Dubai, gave us 2 sites. We should be much further along. For those of you who aren't in the UK, the name Liz Truss won't necessarily mean anything. But for anyone listening in the UK, she was our 49-day prime minister who torpedoed the economy quite significantly in sort of late September, early October. And that has had a material impact on our business in terms of the speed that we wanted to do things, because there's much less liquidity in the market. And we are fundraising at the moment, but it reduced our ability to go into those international markets when we wanted to. But hopefully we'll be there soon. We're opening in our first franchise space in Johannesburg in a couple of months. So that will be really interesting. Yeah. Operated by the asset manager themselves. Okay. I won't say where it is because they haven't announced it yet, but it's the obvious shopping center in that city. And that's been really interesting because of effectively the network effects of having spaces in different places. Like, I'd love Ron to be able to pop into Sook in Venice or wherever and see a British brand that perhaps was operating that Sook space from Great Britain and vice versa. You know, we can put a Californian brand into Edinburgh and they can test and learn, because so much about retail and your customers has been gut feel historically. We want to create a platform where people can test and learn geographically, and you can understand hopefully better than any other platform what works best in which location at which time. And if it doesn't work, you change the test, just like our A/B testing online. And that's going to be really powerful. We think about, I mean, London's such a cosmopolitan city, the diaspora of different cultures who love engaging with brands from their home countries. And equally, you know, I've got some very cool swimming trunks, California swimming trunks that you can only get in the US these days. I'd love it if they could come to London. So we just want to remove all those barriers and increase flexibility in what's an amazing world of retail.
Great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. Go ahead, Ron. Go ahead. I'll ask my. Go ahead.
I want to follow up on what John's saying, because part of what's missing often in that e-commerce experience is the ability to capture feedback. And if a 2%, 3% conversion rate on a website, you will never know why someone didn't convert. And similarly in a store, often if the conversion rate's at 15%, you don't always know what the 85 didn't like, but you can ask questions and you can dig in further and you can understand fit and design and like how the product's being used. And just that ability for a designer, a founder, anyone to be in a space and speak to your customer and ask questions and have product tried on and listen and change your strategy based on what you learned over a weekend is absolutely invaluable. And I think that's where so many D2C brands struggle, is just their inability to capture customer feedback, because you can't do it live. And just having these, without making a major multi-million-dollar investment in the store, which ultimately they may do, but to have this A/B test, as John described, I can't think of a better way to learn how to make improvements to your brand than speak to your customers.
There's some quite interesting kind of quite analog tricks as well to drive sales that you just can't replicate online. And I guess share a few of the funny ones. Like, we rent queues to some of our customers. So you will have, a fake queue outside a shop, and it's so powerful. So powerful in terms of driving people in. It's just like ripping off the nightclub effect, where people always have a queue outside a nightclub. And we're finding now live streaming is actually having a similar effect. People are like moths to a lamp when they see something interesting going on. And you can drive a whole customer base that's not necessarily interested in your product just because people are nosy, basically. And that's quite interesting too, in terms of, I read an interesting quote, which was, the plural of anecdote is not data. And I think that's just, you know, so telling in terms of analog versus digital. You can drive all of the online data you like, to Ron's point. You don't necessarily get the full answer.
Yeah, I think it's really, really fascinating. John, when it comes to, because you talk a lot about, and I heard a lot about community in your business, and how is, can you expand on that, the community aspect? Why community is something important, and something that that happens in Sook?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing to say is that, you know, it just is embedded in our social mission. It's crazy that there's nearly 100,000 empty shops in the UK, and communities can't enjoy them. You know, they should be community assets. It's ridiculous that a broken business model leaves them as, you know, wasting assets. You think about, you know, just from a environmental perspective as well, why build new stuff when we've got loads of stuff that can be repurposed? So that's super important to us. But also, community is really, really important to big brands, because your brand champions are best if they are already authentically within the community. So it makes sense to embed that in not just your business model, but your shopping center. That's what drives feet. Big asset managers struggle with footfall outside of peaks, and actually using amenity and community use on low value retail hours, which are the majority of hours, just makes sense, because people will then, you know, maybe go into your F&B offer, or they'll shop in adjacencies. You know, it's smart. And so what we basically do is underwrite the economic viability in a Robin Hood kind of way by selling the hours that obviously in the UK everyone wants, basically the weekends, at a premium. We are completely viable if we just sell our weekends. But then you've got 5 days left in the week, to some of which are still valuable from a retail perspective, that you can sell at a different price, and you can make that price accessible to all sorts of other occupiers. And then I think the other piece that's worth saying, and this is just to me an obvious efficiency, but most shops don't open till 10 a.m. and they close at 6. Depends on where you are in the world. In the UAE, the evening's really important, and the morning less so. But, you know, why not be, as we do, repurpose so that you can address the wellness market, you know, yoga, Pilates, you know, in that slot before work? Why not, you know, flip into an event space post 6 p.m.? You know, even the dream tenant for a landlord in the UK, let's say an H&M or something like that, is basically just an empty shop Monday through to Thursday, an empty shop full of stuff. And I want to, you know, bring life back, and a community, as I say, sits at the absolute core of that.
So it's all about repurposing the space, isn't it? I know Levi's. So Levi's in the UK tried to do it with their flagship on Regent Street a good few years ago, whereby they had this modular setup, so they could trade at 10 a.m. Till, to your point, till 6 or 7, and then they could kind of close the modular fixturing and then host live events for like emerging brands. I think they did that for a small amount of time, but I think they perhaps just focused on music, let's say. But they could have taken it a step further, couldn't they, in terms of, okay, in the earlier hours, why don't you transition into a yoga studio or a spin class or something?
Yeah.
There's so much potential, isn't there?
Yeah, it's just not that hard to do. I mean, we're even in discussions with retail banks, another sort of failed business model. You know, that banks are closing down at some crazy level in the UK at the moment because they're completely unviable. It costs them sort of £300,000 per customer in some instances just to keep the things going. Well, why not just have a touch point? So at lunchtime, which is when everyone wants to go to the bank, they pop out the office, go to the bank. You can go and engage with a human and not sit on a phone. You know, cash is less important now. You can see with what's behind me how easy it would be to turn it into a banking setup. Mm. And out-of-home media is increasingly important as well, because, of course, there doesn't actually need to be anything. It could all be digital. I mean, some of our fit-outs are much more digital and immersive. You know, why not be a place for a media channel? You know, could you be streaming BBC News? Could it be, Netflix onboarding customers? There is enormous amounts of potential. And what's brilliant about that is it's so light touch from a management perspective, and you can sell it at pretty low cost, that your space is always activated. And how can that exist outside of shops too? Like, think about office lobbies, residential lobbies. We're about to do our first airport, which obviously is a bit more traditional retail environment, but it's a new media, it's another media channel, effectively, a living advert that gets eyeballs on it in a much more engaged way than something that you get, 1.2 seconds while scrolling through phone. And it's just not difficult to drive people in with a prop or two, and importantly, an offer. And we're all now very comfortable with QR code technology. Well, screens can push that customer journey straight onto your device, which not only gets you quite close to your shopping basket, but it also potentially gets you all sorts of interesting learnings and insights about that side of the customer journey too. So it's all about existing right at that intersection between digital and physical.
Yeah, I was curious about being one of the first movers, John. What were your challenges? Because I believe the landlords, they were probably disturbed and at the beginning, but now I would see value in this, being a landlord. I don't know, but what were your challenges? I think it would be interesting to hear from you.
Well, building any sort of marketplace is pretty much the toughest business to try and set up, because you've got two customers effectively. We approached it from the landlord side first, and it's really tough because actually, even though Sooks can generate way more income than a rental income would produce for a landlord, they actually can't value it in the same way. I won't go into the details, but the way that essentially landlords value assets is heavily linked to risk. So they would rather have a lower rent that is guaranteed for a long period of time than a really high rent that there's no guarantee of it in a year from now. And of course, our customers can book live, and that lack of certainty is something that can freak the landlords out. Because of our timing and because there's so many empty shops, landlords are having to think differently, and that's been the opportunity. From a brand perspective, there's also, with some of the established high street brands, there's a mindset that is, right, we're going to find out what the footfall is outside this shop. Then we're going to do a calculation based on the price point of our products. We'll apply a conversion rate to that, and that will tell us whether or not, if we put our shop in this place, it's going to be profitable or not. And the departments that lead that are often run by, guys in there coming towards the end of their careers, predominantly, who don't desperately want to change and do something that they don't understand. And that can be quite challenging to move stuff. But of course, what we're really challenging is that whole theory around footfall, because what we're saying is you can drive your own footfall, and actually it's deeply inefficient plonking yourself in somewhere for a decade and hoping that 2% of it's going to convert over, a really inefficient timeline. Pop up, activate, and drive the success that you would have got in a month or two, and then get out. And I think timing is helping us. Brands are having to rationalize their estates because, we are in a super tough market globally. And just doing the same thing is not going to necessarily survive the test of time. It's not to say that big brands are going to disappear and people are going to stop taking 10-year leases, but people are realizing that there's room in the market for a more agile and flexible approach.
Yeah, and if anyone's not following kind of John and Sook on social media, you're missing those moments where there literally are hundreds of people in the queue waiting to see something that's happening in Sook. And so I think for those brands that are hesitant around like footfall and understanding conversion rates and the value of the brand, all you have to do is look and see what has happened for some of these in the past. And you can understand the success opportunity of just having that kind of buzz. You can't pay enough money to have that kind of buzz on a website or on an Instagram account. You just can't. It's invaluable to have 300 people waiting in line to see what's happening in that space. I think it's incredible to see what could happen and the potential of what you're just starting to build, John.
Well, just to follow up on that, Ron, I mean, where we are also helped is that there is more retail in the world than there ever has been. It's just a lot of it sitting online. And what's been kind of quite joyful for us is, we've unlocked the door, but it's the incredible entrepreneurs launching these brands that are driving our success for us in some ways. Depoppers being a brilliant example. They're 20-year-old girls predominantly, making thousands and thousands of pounds in an afternoon. And people wonder why it's difficult to recruit people in physical retail these days. It's because why would you earn £12 an hour at H&M, surrounded by miserable people, when you can have your own Depop and be, the richest kid at school? And they drive their own feet. It's super authentic. It's a world away from like a big, let's say, private equity backed retailer that's paid a third party marketing team to create its brand. These are founder led businesses that are, just raw and authentic, because the founder's in the shop bagging stuff up and taking your cash, and they've got followers. It's just amazing to see, and I really look forward to sort of shepherding those guys and helping them grow into the big brands of the future.
So it's really mind blowing, because I mean, a typical use case would be so for example, if I'm an influencer, let's put it this way, and I teach yoga, or I have a fashion brand and I want to activate my brand in a specific location, and for that matter, I read about Oxford Street, then I could just cut a deal with you, pay by the hour or a few hours, and then what it's like, John? Can you walk us through?
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, our pricing is really simple. We sell time, basically, and it's as easy as booking a tennis court or a seat on an aeroplane. If you want Saturday afternoon on Oxford Street, it will be more expensive than if you want Monday morning in Southampton. It's a demand-based model. It's completely transparent. Any money you make when you're in the space, you keep. We don't muck around with turnover or anything like that. It's super brand friendly and designed, to support the success of those brands and keep them coming back, which is working. We have about 45% repeat customer at the moment, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I think, part of the reason that we're approaching it like that is to provide opportunity, but also to allow people to question whether actually the gut feel of, I'm launching my activewear brand, I need to be on Oxford Street. What's supporting that logic? Would you actually be more successful if you're in a market town at a specific time? And what does the data tell you about where you're going to have your most success? Because there are amazing entrepreneurs in every town and city. In the UK, particularly, London kind of sucks talent in, but it needn't. And with the future of work is completely up in the air. So will the dominance of these big city prime retail locations actually be diminished? And are you better off as a brand thinking about how you fit into people's new work lives that we're still unsure about? And even if you don't believe in that, isn't it worth keeping your options open just in case? And that's what we're seeing from big and brand and small brands alike. It's like, right, what can we learn? Where is the best place to put our resource? Where are our customers actually? Because they probably don't really know.
I think for me, what I really like about your business model is you kind of take the hassle out of everything for that, that startup or that small business owner. I think sometimes, and I've kind of gone through this a little bit myself, setting up my own consultancy. It can be quite hard to navigate the do's and don'ts. So if you can actually, take away the admin and everything that's kind of associated with that for someone that's particularly new to this industry, selling their service, selling their product, etc. It's very much like a win-win situation, and they literally just come into the space and sell their product or sell their service. So you literally just take that hassle out of it. It's fantastic.
Well, we want it to be ultimately self-serve.
Yeah.
And we do find people in their first time they use it, it can be a bit stressful. It's like, I don't know, putting on a party for your partner or something like that. You worry. And then the second time they're like, okay, I know how all this works, easy. Yeah. And I always try and draw the analogy, and I hope it's not too much of a sort of reach, but that our fit out is actually like a device, like a smartphone. It's a big one, obviously, but it physically it iterates. We're constantly upgrading. The fit out behind me is like version 2. We're on to sort of version 6 in some spaces, with all different configurations and levels of digitalization effectively. But it's all underpinned, just like an iPhone is, by the same software that obviously can update really easily. Yeah. And that interactivity of the device with whatever it is you want to do facilitates an amazing retail experience, but critically, as you say, ease of use for occupiers. And we don't want it to stop with just retail. Like, why can't you have your kids party in here and the walls are just, photos of their friends or their favorite cartoon character or whatever? Can't, the artists of the future, rather than this crazy art gallery model where the gallery takes 50% of their sales and the gallery is basically empty except for the launch party when people are bribing them in with champagne. We've had our South Molton Street site, a guy turned it into a shrine to his girlfriend and then proposed to her. So, like, where do the possibilities end? Can this be a place for the Girl Guides and the Cub Scouts? Can it be the village hall of the future? Can we have, can it be a meeting room venue for some of the co-working spaces? Can it be a distribution channel for sandwiches at lunchtime? Does Pret-a-Manger need all the stores that it's got, or would it be easier to use a dark kitchen and just have that last mile effectively in a space like ours? Who knows how far we can push it, but I'm loving challenging the mindset of how spaces can be used, and really kind of getting inside the heads of some of the local authorities, because they're like, what planning use is this? I'm sure that's not allowed, but we'll let you do it anyway.
Just keep pushing. Yeah. Thanks.
I'm still very, very intrigued by other use cases. So, for example, how many setups, if that's the right word in English, can you have in a day? So morning would be, I heard you giving the example of Greg's. I mean, and they have a certain type of customer in the morning, people who probably went out for a drink, and then in the afternoon you would have other people, right? How many setups or stores or occasions you're able to have in one day in
well, theoretically
Sook?
Theoretically it's it's hourly, but I mean, if I tried to impose that on some of my team at the moment, I think they'd be unhappy, because of course there are operational considerations in doing it. And I mentioned the UK sort of economic climate at the moment. We've actually, just to preserve some of our team, we've slowed down the changeovers so that it's not happening too regularly, because but not to a final point of it, we had to make our team a bit smaller to save money. And that, when you're in the early stages of a business that's building towards scale, you do some quite unscalable things, and I just don't want to break people. We want it to be fun. But yeah, I mean, that if it's just in the digital offer, you're just using the out-of-home media customers, it's a touch of a button and you change it. And thinking about the utility of what the right thing at the right time is can inform that granularly. Our spaces that are in next to train stations, for instance, there's 2 periods of the day with extraordinarily different footfall to all the other time. So every day we're operating, we're learning more about what fits best. And just as a kind of random anecdote, because you mentioned Greg's, I read somewhere that they make more money in their Birmingham station site after 11 p.m. on a Friday evening than they do anywhere else in a week. And it's just basically people in Birmingham, I think it's Birmingham, might be Manchester, going out, having a few drinks and desperately wanting a sausage roll on the way home. And, you know, like, why? I just don't understand why the retail industry has never got to the stage of thinking in granular detail about time, because it's so obvious that people's shopping habits are dictated by time and location and a whole host of other things. But time is the most obvious one. We all know if you go to a big shopping centre in the UK on a Saturday, it'll be busier than a Monday. It's obvious. So why is the retail offer the same? It just doesn't make sense to me.
And what exactly do you, for example, if I wanted to set up an occasion, a store today, what sort of services do you offer, John? Does Sook currently offers? Because I heard you're working with Canva in terms of design, right? Canva, the Australian technology design company. So your team is also doing all the design and making it for.
Well, the reason, I mean, the partnership with Canva is so that people can self-serve, you know, because there's lots of people when you work in retail that want to make money off you with advice and support and this, that, and the other. And you can spend a lot of money on guys doing stuff that is really affordable. I mean, and I operate the business with the philosophy of the lean startup, which is, you know, hacking together using lots of tools, lots of free tools. You know, I built the first website on a templated model. Just, it's so easy now, you know, to create something. That's the same philosophy with Sook. We're trying to make it really easy for you to self-serve. But of course, if you want something even more bespoke or you need human support, we'll do anything. We'll manage your entire strategy, and we will staff it. We'll do all of your fulfillment. We'll do all of your sales and marketing, the design associated with it, provide you a full suite of analytics about your performance and give you recommendations about, you know, how you can improve it. As standard, there's quite a lot of hand-holding from our amazing customer services and sales team, particularly for first-timers, as I mentioned, because, you know, onboarding people, if you keep them happy, they just keep coming back. But yeah, there is, see you, Ron. Like, nice to hang out. Enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you.
Yeah, we will make it. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible, not just for brands, but also for landlords. You know, we're not a tenant. We're an asset management tool, but we basically take all the headache of this away from the landlord too. So we just sit in there 36 months, which is our standard deal, and make that landlord money.
Got it. So you don't buy. Do you have properties also, or you don't buy the property? You rent the property from?
No. So it's worth me giving you a bit of context. WeWork's IPO was failing when I was putting Sook together, and of course, WeWork is a very capital-intensive business. They take leases and they pay a fortune on fit-outs. So our model is the opposite of that. We don't take leases. And in our first 8 deals, we got the landlords to pay for the fit outs too, which we then owned and can redeploy. What we've started doing now is we pay for the fit out ourselves, because what the landlord gets is a revenue share. And if you're asking them to take all the upfront risk, that revenue share is about 60%. But when we start taking the risk, we can push it really hard and take 70, 80% of the revenue. So what we're in effect doing is generating a lot of cash, a fair amount which goes to the landlord, but the rest goes to us, and we're doing that out of other people's assets. So it's an asset-light business underpinned by software.
Perfect. Forgive me, but what is fit out? When you say fit out,
so if you know the walls, the screens.
Perfect.
In the UK we call it a fit out. The interior design maybe make more sense for you, Carlos, but you know, ours is it's a kit of parts, right? And we can take it away with us. So that's really important part of the sustainability journey. You know, once an agreement ends with the landlord because they can move us along or somewhere else, we just take everything away with us and redeploy it elsewhere. And that's great for our business because it means we don't have to buy it again. Often, I mean, there is damage and wear and tear, but generally we've got, you know, a decent fit out that we can redeploy. But it's also fantastic for the planet because, you know, normally when someone fits out a shop, they'll paint the walls, they'll build all sorts of bespoke stuff, and that just goes straight into landfill after a few years, which is actually a scandal.
It's almost like a Lego like business, you know, the Danish company where you can modular, right? It's a modular solution.
And you know that it is exactly, and they're really in the UK. They're really turning the heat up on sustainability. So just by, I think, I can't remember the date. I don't know if you read this recently, Bradley, but they're all shops are going to have a certain environmental meet various criteria, which is actually going to be extremely challenging. And of course, whilst the fit out doesn't necessarily directly relate to the building performance, it does help having something that's operating in your assets that's completely compliant, because it won't be long before some shops just will not be allowed to function in their current guise.
True, isn't it? Where do you how big do you see Sook expanding to? You spoke about overseas. You spoke a little earlier around franchise agreements. Would you like to be in every country? Where's your target? Where's your sweet spot?
So I mean, we call it our big, hairy, audacious goal, which is more square feet than Walmart. So, you know, let's give it a good go. It'll be a lot more shops than Walmart as well, but if we achieve that, because of course our footprint is a lot smaller. But I believe that, you know, there's an opportunity for our business and businesses like us, because I expect copycats to be, you know, maybe 30% of the total retail market of the future. Because when you think about it, most brands just don't need the traditional model. And I think my son's 3. By the time he's my age, I think, you know, it's not unrealistic to think that 30% of the market could have changed in this way. Our goal at the moment is, to be in at least 3 more developed markets next year. So, you know, we obviously answer to our investors, and, you know, investors like to see financial success first and foremost. There's no point in us trying to open in Timbuktu any moment soon, because it won't be commercially interesting compared to opening in London, Paris, New York, etc. But we are pushing in the UK, which is obviously where we've got all of our sites at the moment. We're pushing that limit of what's the lowest end of the threshold of economic viability. One of my sort of bits of inspiration for this was actually, I was at a wedding on a Scottish island called Arran, and there was a library van happened to be there the day I was in whatever the town is called, and there was a massive queue for the library van. You know, that's just books, right? Boring old books, analog as anything, but all of the islanders had come out because that's your window to get a book. And I just thought, well, with that principle, if you could rotate interesting brands through Arran, could you achieve the same thing? And I'm not saying Arran is the threshold to success or failure, but I do think that undesirable retail locations are attractive to brands. They're just not attractive to set something up for a decade, but they'd be interesting to pop up for a period of time, because, you know, Nike's got customers everywhere. So why expect their customers to have to come to Oxford Street to see the latest concept trainers?
Absolutely, take that concept to them. Amazing.
John, how do you I mean, how is it that you acquire customers today? Is it word of mouth? Is it you know, the good experience that your current customers, you said 45% you have recurring customers almost, that they stay with you? Is it word of mouth? Tell us about the acquisition. It's very interesting.
It's conflicting emotion, because I'm sort of really proud that nearly all of our revenue to date is organic. but I'm also a bit embarrassed that I haven't done a better job of getting marketing out there until now. And, you know, every business grows, I think, slightly in line with the strengths and weaknesses of the founder. Obviously, I know a lot about real estate, and I'm perhaps weaker on the sales and marketing. But we now have, you know, a great team in place, and we've in the last 3 months just started turning on digital marketing, which, guess what, seeing transformational impact. So you know, that's why we're so excited about the future, because word of mouth has demonstrated that this is economically viable, but obviously understanding the power of inbound leads and understanding how much we need to spend, which is surprisingly low to get them, is just going to take us to the next level and allow us to, well, scale. And that's what it's all about, getting as many of these sites open as we can and ensuring that they're never empty.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah, I think I have been impacted a few times by seeing some use cases. It was a company selling some sort of sink. I'm not sure, doing some kind of activation in one of your cooker. Yeah, looked really nice. It looked amazing.
They're famous for their hot water taps. Yeah, it's a brilliant system. You know, it's in that space. We went from Raspberry Pi, which is a electronics brand, very popular in the UK, who do a UK kind of roadshow with us and always have big cubes. We went from electronic brands, this is all in the same week, to hot water tap, homeware, to Depop. And, you know, all three were successful. So it just shows how versatile you can be. But sorry, Carlos, I interrupted you.
No, you're saying, and then I'm having ideas. So like brands, they can collaborate as well in your space if they want to do like a collaborative activation, right? I think it would make sense depending on what they're selling sometimes.
Yeah, we don't actually get involved in that because we found that, interestingly, you know, brands are, if you think of brands as egos, sometimes they love, you know, being next to another brand, but sometimes it can cause some real problems. Oh, that person's not doing it right, et cetera, et cetera. And it's one of the reasons I think, you know, the department store model has struggled, because brands are competing against one another. And that's why we focus on allowing this solo occupancy. The interesting collaborations that I think are going to become more prevalent is big brands collaborating with small local brands and brand champions. Because, you know, you think about it, it makes sense if you're, what's an example? Let's say you're M&S, you're Nobody's Child, one of the M&S brands. Why not support an up and coming designer in Leeds, and enjoy all the custom that designer brings, but also sell your product for the big business. In doing so, you can, well, quite cynically drive sales off using other people, but you can also minimize the cost for the local person, and it's really authentic, and it discharges all sorts of goals that businesses have around supporting community and startups. So I think there's some really interesting kind of collaborations there.
Agreed. Yeah, like from my side, I think we're about to wrap this up, John, but so first, thank you very much. This is really, really interesting. I think I read somewhere that the total addressable market for this it was a big number. I don't know if I saw $75 billion or something like that. What is the opportunity that you're seeing here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I always see it from the real estate perspective, and broadly in terms of empty shops. You know, this is just delivering a portfolio of 150 sites in the UK, which of course, if it's as successful as I believe it can be, is not a big portfolio, and could easily be achieved. And we've already got 200 sites in our pipeline, 80 of which we could probably do in the next 3 months if we had unlimited budget. You know, at that level, it's a unicorn business based on selling time. So, you know, that's why I, as ballsy and bold and ambitious as it is, the Walmart goal sort of stands for us, because, you know, we think we can get there, and it can become ubiquitous with not just retail locations, but non-retail locations too, because it's not all about shopping. In many instances, it's not about selling anything. It's about doing stuff. It's about being together. There's a reason it's called Sook, the Arabic word for market, because it's a place to congregate.
Yeah.
It's, you know, our tagline is, it's a portal to infinite in real life opportunities. And that's really, as we see it, you step into it and do wherever your imagination takes you, you can do in these things.
All right. Bradley, would you like to make any final questions?
No, I was just going to say it was a pleasure talking to you this afternoon. There's no other questions from me. It was really interesting hearing about
Indeed.
how you've grown a business of, you know, in the UK alone, of 11 stores, with plans to grow much, much bigger. And I think, having been born in London, grown up in London, living in London, you sometimes see London as a bit of an incubator for, you know, new brands. But it's, you know, it's really refreshing with friends dotted all around the UK for them to be talking about Sook as well, in terms of, oh yeah, we have one in Leeds. So before this call, I was on a WhatsApp chat saying, oh, you know, meeting yourself, and they're like, you know, it's a great setup in terms of Leeds, and you've got one in Edinburgh as well.
Yeah, you know,
it's great to see the message.
Technically, we're already international. We're in Scotland.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But no, thank you. Great meeting you.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, that was great. So that was John Hoyle. Is that correct? John Hoyle. Hoyle. Sorry. John Hoyle, founder of Sook. So John, thanks very much. It was a pleasure.
See you soon. Cheers, guys.
See you. Bye. All right. So I'll end the broadcast.